is a Pop-Tart a ravioli? What is the definition of because when I think of ravioli, I think of pasta.
I'm gonna look up the definition of ravioli and see if
Yes,
we're
this is important. This is the things that we really need to research on this show.
Talking to a person, who could it be? It's TBD with IRV.
Hey, welcome to TBD with IRV. I'm your host, Isabella Vergun, and if you've never tuned into this show before, we're going to interview some cool people with cool things and talk about what they're doing over the pandemic, whether it's artists, small business owners, musicians, or like our guest today, dungeon masters. So we're going to talk to Ari Schoenwetter. Did I do that right, Ari?
Close enough.
Oh, fucking Ari. Fuck. This is going to be like a sequence of me pronouncing your name wrong. Ari Schoenwetter.
Schoenwetter.
Ari Schoenwetter.
Yeah.
Yes. It took a couple times.
Got it.
Oh, very excited to have you on today, Ari. Ari is a talented human being and also my DM. So I'm excited to have you on today. This is going to be great.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. That's always good to hear. So let's just start out. How are you doing? How are you doing today, Ari? I'm gonna also drink occasionally if that's cool with you. If you.
Oh, sure. I'll just do the same.
Perfect. How are you doing today, Ari?
I'm doing all right. I just got off work and now I'm here and doing an interview, and then I'm gonna hit the hay and take a very long nap.
I think that's a well-earned decision. I want to talk a little bit about how you first got into either TTR or TPG. I kind of, you make the assumption these days that everyone's first entree is into Dungeons and Dragons. That's not necessarily always true. So when did you first get into this tabletop role-playing game world for the layman?
Well, for me, I actually did start with Dungeons and Dragons. You could say that it runs in my blood. I started, or the most clear memory I have of starting is going to my aunt's house and them picking up the 3.5 core rulebooks and looking through all the pictures and seeing all the cool art there was and going, ooh, there's monks in here, there's rogues, look at those monsters. And I didn't know what I was doing, and my cousins very much knew what they were doing, and they very much were like, you're a little child, no. But, I just kept on doing stuff, and I eventually did learn the game and how to do it, and started playing games with people, and it was a good time.
So you've been into D&D before the media called it cool. I mean, I think we're still on that edge, but it's very in now, I think, to be into D&D.
That's very true. In my family, we were into D&D before. Let's see. They were probably into D&D before even the Satanic Panic. Because my mom and dad actually met at a D&D game.
That's adorable, and I did not know that. But the fun fact about Ari is that we definitely know that Ari's mother has some DMing experience, as once in a while she will contribute things to the game that we then hear on the other end, which is always very exciting. But no, I didn't know that they met at a D&D game. That's actually very sweet. Were they both players, or was one of them a DM at that time?
They were both players, and my dad had been invited by my aunt to come and play at the game. They played for a while. He went home and said, wow, this game is for nerds. I'm never playing that game again. But he did see a pretty cute girl at the game, so, things happen.
That's actually adorable. That's not dissimilar. My dad once played a game of D&D when he was in college, and it was one of those group of very kind of gatekeepery, and obviously kind of the more original editions of D&D could be a little more brutal than now. There's a lot of things that make it a little more, there's a little more nuance and storytelling involved. So he died within the first like 15 minutes of playing, and they were like, all right, Paul, go sit in the
Ooh.
corner. And he was like, I don't
Oh.
like this. This is not fun. So I actually made him play his first game in like, 40 years. Oh, I'm sorry, Dad, I aged
wow.
you up. Like, like 30, in 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
I DM'd a one shot for him and his younger brother and my cousin and my brother. And just to show him, just to take the bad taste out of his mouth, and to show him when I was playing D&D, I wasn't being a mean nerd. We were just having, some role playing fun. And he had I believe he had a delightful time. He had a stick bug companion who he loved much.
That's great. Now you're not being a mean nerd. You're definitely just being a huge gay nerd.
Yes, a huge gay nerd and a mean person. I try not to combine them into one thing. I think that there are certain Venn diagrams from which you can only pick certain circles and still be a tolerable human being.
Right.
Yeah. No, this is so you started playing very early on. When did you first DM your first campaign? And for those of you who don't know, DM is Dungeon Master. They can also go by GM Grandmaster, MC, like in theater. There are lots of terminologies for that, but we use DM, Dungeon Master.
Because we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see. My first campaign was in middle school. I had a group of friends that would meet up at lunchtime, and while we would eat, we would play little games in between. And my experience then was more like drawing on graph paper and then literally just flipping through the monster manual and being like, this one, and then flipping through the monster, that one, and then throwing it in. It worked out.
I think
most of the time.
Yeah. In terms of, so I mean, it's definitely been a long time since then, because anyone who can, I think that's a great exercise just for any DM to do, probably, to be like, all right, like, how are we gonna get through this shenanigans? But you've created some really amazing worlds. The campaign we're currently in, the Metropolis of Mayhem, is sort of a variation on, like, you use some 5e elements, you use a lot of homebrew elements. The planes all exist essentially like in a much more mishmashy, you can travel between them through portals sort of way. And so that's kind of amazing, because there's a lot of familiar elements for those people who've played before, but there's a lot of twists to it which make it very original and fun. So as a DM, what do you usually do to prepare for both the campaign when you're kind of preparing for that, and also for an individual session?
For preparing for the campaign overall, a lot of what I did was it all started from our session 0, which unfortunately you weren't a part of at the time.
We had our own 0.
But from there, we sort of just flew up a whole bunch of different ideas on the wall, and I wrote all of them down. And from what I understood of what the players wanted, I started developing something that would fit something that I was having a personal interest and stake in, but also would make everybody feel like they were really well included. Yeah. And the consensus I got at that first session was that they wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, but they didn't want to play Dungeons and Dragons as, it stands in the test of time right now, where it's, it's not the typical setting, we could say. And from there, I just started thinking about the story, and a major component of the Metropolis of Mayhem campaign is this emperor who I originally threw out from a video of Matt Colville's of his saying that when you think of societies, you should think of the dead societies that come before it. And so I've thrown out this idea of the emperor being a thing, and they seem to really jive with it, and they just kept on adding ideas to it. And then once I had gotten an idea of things that they wanted and things that had started interesting me, I started to flesh it out and really expand it. And a lot of what I would do was to literally just go to work. And while I was working, I would have these thoughts just running in my head. And I am notorious for having papers in my pocket at work. So I would take them out and I would literally just scribble whatever I was thinking on when I had free time into these papers, shove them back into my pocket, and keep going. So a lot of my notes were originally just scribbled down on scrap paper.
And for those of you, obviously, who aren't watching or who aren't in the campaign that we're playing specifically, that the Emperor and the Empire, part of this dead society that the metropolis of Mayhem is sort of built upon now, but still lots of relics from it, still lots of ruins from it, and still trying, I think, a fundamental, there's lore and legend around it, but not a very solid idea of what that meant in reality for a lot of people, or like solid history. And so I think that adds such an interesting level to it, because you're playing within a society that is functional, that is busy, that is crazy, but even they only have so many answers, much like I don't know, I think the idea of having a kind of dead civilization, or not quite dead civilization, but you know what I mean, like the ruins of a civilization that it's built upon, is really interesting to world building anywhere, because it's totally fine to have a completely new world, or a world that has been the way it's been for quite a long time, or starting at that is definitely a way to run a campaign, but you can have a lot of cool lore involved in it that way.
And the trick to that is to create lore that your players will actually want to be interested in.
Yeah.
Or will connect in a way that will pull them in or want them to ask questions.
Yeah.
Because one of the pitfalls of creating your own campaign like this is that you can create all this lore, but if the players don't become interested in it, then you might have all of this just sitting in your head and actually nothing to do with it, because the players are just like, oh yeah, history, that's fine.
Yeah.
Dungeon.
That's a pretty good point. And I think that you and I've DM'd not nearly as extensively as you have, but there's a similar kind of, I think that, again, DMs run campaigns very different ways, but heavy player involvement in the creation of a world and in creation of your campaign is often very beneficial to you when you are running a campaign for those people. Yep. To have lore that they're interested in, to integrate their personal stories into it, to have reasons that they want to. It's a lot less railroady. You don't have to push them into things if they are already interested in the things that you put in front of them. And I think on that note, you are a very good DM. We can say that. And I say that, you know, obviously I'm having you on here, but having the players, you're running a relatively large campaign. There's 7 of us, I think. Am I doing math right? I know I always say 8 because I count you as being there too, obviously, because you're there. But a relatively large campaign, you're dealing with a lot of people with a lot of agendas, but we're all very happy with the campaign. We all love you as a DM. There hasn't been any like huge drama or problems. And so I would ask, you know, for you, what do you think is the most important? What are tips or tricks that you have for writing a campaign or running a campaign that's really engaging to your players in that way?
I know that something that I do that I feel like helps engage the players is I do a good job of listening. Listening is really important because if you hear your players planning and they're just sort of spinning out and they're talking about this and this and this and this, you don't want to ignore that, because something that they're talking about could be a really good idea, or something that they're talking about could be really not what you were thinking at all, but you could find a way to integrate it. A lot of DMing is having that screen in front of you and being like, oh yeah, I totally have this plan, but it can always be changed.
Yeah.
You never want to keep anything static,
Mm.
um, and I know that I've had moments where somebody has come up with something really cool or said something really cool that completely changed the way that I thought that something could be done. I feel like I never want to make something and then never change it. I always want there to be room for people to expand their ideas and expanded my own ideas as well.
Yeah, so there's an element of kind of flexibility and improv to it. Obviously not negating all the work that you've been doing, but yeah, I think that is a really good point. Being a good listener and being able to kind of, I think of it sort of like play a game in conversation with your players. Like you're not just there, and you are literally, right, as the DM, running all of these characters and running all of these people who are interacting with your characters at any given point, and being able to keep that engaging and make it fun and go along, again, not with every harebrained idea that your players come up with, but to be able to listen and see what they're most interested in. I think that's a very important thing about that. And how many, obviously D&D's changed a lot since COVID started, and I think kind of for the good and for the bad in some ways, because obviously there's something really great about being there in person with people, about seeing them, about having that, sharing snacks and being there in the same room. But there is something really interesting about how we've been able to have these campaigns start with us, people all over the country and all over the world, playing in one campaign with people they haven't been with in person. And I think part of the reason that D&D has been seeing such a resurgence, obviously post Stranger Things, but now during COVID, is it is such a fun and engaging way, maybe even more so than something like a board game or Quiplash, which can be fun on a one-off, but doesn't have that same continued narrative that D&D does. How have you found, either playing or DMing, kind of both, how have you found the landscape of TTRPG playing has changed since COVID started?
Well, for certain, planning sessions is a little bit easier. just a little bit. I know that before this, I had never DM'd a online campaign before. I had only done in-person games, and so when pandemic hit and when I eventually started to DM online, it was basically a whole new experience for me. And learning all the ins and outs of doing it online has been really fun and interesting for me. Like, even when I was doing it in person, I didn't have game mats, I didn't have figures. And now doing it online, you have so many resources that you can use. And then in regards to the pandemic, and shifting the focus to meeting out of person, I think personally it also just felt like people rely on the game. Like, I've had people tell me that literally one of the things that keeps them sane is to be ready for the next game, and to know that there's something coming, and to have an expectation for a story, and to want to continue that narrative. And yeah, it's been really interesting feeling the emotional ties to the game.
Yeah. That's a lot different than when you're running a campaign and day of 5 people cancel and you're just like, all right, I guess we're not having this today. When it is a lot of people coming for their kind of weekly, like, I need to know what's going to happen. There's something I would imagine very satisfying about that.
And I think also a lot of people are just happy to have drama. No, this particular group is very, very role play focused, which I love. I love, because I've always had action oriented groups.
Oh, wow.
So having a
Not
role
like
play
that.
focus, it's really different for me. And I don't know, there's just something satisfying about seeing characters engaged in your world and invested in it, and not just wanting to, go through and be the heroes and beat up some bad guys, but actually wanting to like think about themselves and who their characters are and all that good ish.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a because I would say, I'm gonna make a guess that at least once a session, there is a point where everyone laughs so hard that the game has to stop for a second
Mm-hmm.
because it's gotten out of hand. At least one, and there is at least one person who cries like once a game. And yeah, we do have a very role play heavy focused group, and I think that online really lends itself to that because you don't necessarily have to look each other in the eyes and do voices. There's a little bit more distance. There's been a little bit more opportunity, I think, for people to kind of lean into that, or go into the whisper chat and do their one-on-one drama quick, or that kind of stuff. So it's but I think that it has been, for me at least, a lot of the self-consciousness I had around role playing in D&D. I don't want to say it's exactly gone away, but it's kind of gone away. I think now, even if I sat in a room with people, I'd be much more comfortable diving into it, just having had the practice to do that. In terms of, I think, as we've talked about, we've seen a lot of people who've already been into D&D finding these communities, but we've also been seeing a lot of people who've never done it before doing it for the first time. And I was wondering if you had any advice for first-time DMs in terms of not just obviously these kind of tips and how to get started, but how to find the group to actually have a D&D campaign, because I think that's been, I both think for both players and DMs it's been a little overwhelming, but we were lucky, we were able to find it. You answer the question.
Yeah, it's my job after all. Um, Honestly, for our group in particular, we got lucky. We just found a whole bunch of people that wanted to play, and they were ready to go. Um, it can be hard to find people and get them invested. Um, so I guess if you're trying to find a group, um, the way that I see it is you want to find people that you know that you have a story for. If you know that you have a whole bunch of football friends um, who watch every game and they like doing the analytics and stuff, you can tailor a game to make them feel like they do when they're watching football. If you have a bunch of theater nerd friends that really want to ham it up, there's ways to do that for them. There's ways to find people and make stories for them that it doesn't even matter what system you're using, but you just have to find a way to make stories that will engage people. And then once They are hooked in. It's you can just draw them in with more.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good way of putting it, because there's not one style of DMing that's the right way. I think a lot of people, they get into a podcast or they get into a show. God bless. Matt Mercer is one of the best DMs out there, but not everyone has to be Matt Mercer. I don't know. I have found, in terms of DMing, that one of the most helpful things to me was playing a lot of games and also listening to a lot of different people DM, and knowing that there isn't a style for that, because you can listen to Matt Mercer and his lore and his worlds and his acting, and he is amazing. Or you can listen to Anthony Birch doing Dungeons and Daddies, where they have almost no rules. It is almost completely roleplay based. It is a mess, and it is so fun, and he is also a great DM. And there's not something that makes any person better or worse other than, are your players having a good time? Are they enjoying themselves? Or do they secretly hate you because you're not being a good DM? Or do they hate you to your face because you're not being a good DM? That's a question. I do think about that sometimes, but I like to think I play with people who are open enough that if I was sucking, that they would just be like, this really sucks. I'm so sorry to tell you that I hate this. I've never run a campaign that I felt really like that about. Have you?
I've only had one. Only one, because I've only actually played in like 2 or 3 games. I've always DM'd, and so there was one game where it was online. It was before Metropolis started, and I was trying to find something to do during the pandemic, actually. And I had joined this group, but the people in it were like so grabby. They always had to have the spotlight, and they couldn't let anyone else like show themselves off. And then the DM was just kind of letting that happen, and the story also just wasn't making sense. And so eventually I did have to tell the DM that I just wasn't having a good time. And so we talked about for a while. I played a couple more sessions to confirm it, and then I just had to get out of there. It just wasn't feeling good.
Yeah, I also think it's kind of probably a good thing once in a while to have a bad D&D campaign, because it reminds you that good ones are good.
Yeah, I think that's actually one. It's that game in particular probably inspired me to create the games that I did.
That's really funny. I would actually say that, having my first, and I really hesitate to say, I don't think by any means he was a bad DM, but he was a DM that was creating a campaign uniquely suited for me to not enjoy, which was very much, he was very much the kind of DM versus the players DM.
Oh, I see.
And that can work. There are people who really love kind of the dungeon crawl, Monster Hunter, where they just really love the challenge of it and like kicking the DM's ass. I personally don't, because I like a DM who's not trying actively to kill us. Like I like something where it's, we're a little more give and take. And I think that really made me, when I came out of that, I was like, well, I enjoyed, it for what it was, but I think I would love to try being a DM, because I think it made it clear for me what I would like and what I would not like about having that kind of campaign run for me. But that is the thing. It really depends on, we were lucky. We found a group within a group of already shared common interests, which I think is probably a good way to go about, our natural inclination might be hit up all our closest friends and play a game with them. And that can work. And for a lot of people, it doesn't, because people might not have shared interests. But if you have a group that you belong to. We were in the Dance Commander Disco. We were hanging out with all the Booty Mashup people. It became clear that a lot of us had a shared interest in D&D and Critical Role. We created an offshoot Discord of that, and based on that, there were already a bunch of people who were like, we love this. So, look in those communities that you have already. Is there, are you a cosplayer? Are there a bunch of people who are already in that community who might want to do it? If you're an actor, there might already be a lot of people. Communities that might be like D&D adjacent are probably a good place to start to find people who would be really committed to being involved in the D&D campaign. Again, we were really, I was bonus lucky because somebody dropped out. The last person dropped out of your campaign, and I could just slip in there under the wire.
Yeah, that was the first real session. They played, and then they realized they had a actual job to do, and they couldn't be there all the time.
You're like, no.
But you coming in actually focused a lot of what was going in my mind too.
Oh, that's crazy.
Because I don't know if you've talked about your character Kaisis on the show.
I have not yet talked about my character Kaisis, maybe mentioned, but Kaisis is a Kalishtar bard who's kind of a ghost boy. He's got some ghosty things going on. And otherwise, kind of my thing going into it is I'm the person who comes in with like 10 pages of backstory and a lot of thought, and I love doing that. But I really wanted to not do that this time. So I was like, all right, I'm making the stupid boy who lives in the woods, Ari. Here you go. And I just really let it, like, he only remembers up to the last X amount of years of his life. Like, the only thing he remembers is living in this one place in the Oasis. It's kind of, he has a book. I had little things about him, like maybe he doesn't quite know if he's alive or not. And then Ari's like, yep, that's fine. I was like, you sure? He's like, yep, totally cool.
Yeah, now he has 15 pages of story that you don't know about.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's actually been really fun recently because it's the first time. It's fun playing a character essentially with the kind of amnesia trope who had no interest in a little bit what was inadvertently like a little bit of a Molly Mock or OG a Molly Mock sort of way, who was just kind of like, oh yeah, like that, whatever, here's where I live. And for the first time in his life is now awakening to the fact that like maybe that's not a good thing, has been emotionally fraught. It's been great. And now, obviously, in my campaign, the biggest conspiracy theory is that my character is actually the Emperor. I personally don't believe that, and also think that if you say that enough, then the DM will just change it because that's stupid. But I'm very curious because really 90% of the time Kaisis is just trying to seduce things or being a dumbass and playing with cats, and then all of a sudden like it's just like, here's some trauma, good morning. Yep. And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. So yeah, I think that Kaisis coming in, it was really fun to be able to trust a DM and have a DM who was completely willing to be like, yeah, I am totally willing to take your amnesiac character because I believe now a lot of that, stuff in the ether has become very entangled with the lore of the campaign is what I'm fucking shrugs fucking
could
hard.
Be.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, I can't give spoilers. That'd be
technically
bad.
You do know that's a lie, but you will not share, which is good. It's for the best. The biggest hint right now is that we got into some season 2 content last week, which is very, very exciting. Pause on that. That's great. That's amazing. But I'm feeling very self-indulgent talking about Kaisis so much. So, let's talk a little bit about, sometimes we get a little bit of this DM fatigue. What do you usually do when you have that? Like, do you take a break for a little while? Do you run something else? Like, how do you personally deal with DM fatigue?
Well, once again, I have to turn to the wonderful Matt Colville for my advice here. Um, I remember him saying something wonderful where he was like, "Yeah, if you're not feeling good about what's going on in your story, then you should say." Well, he didn't say this, but I say you should say "fuck it" and find something that interests interests you.
Here we go. We got it.
Because sometimes I would just have these ideas in my head and I'd be like, yeah, that'd be cool, but do I want to do it though? And then I'd be like, but that would be fun, not just for them but for me. If
Yeah.
it's fun for me, it'll be fun for them, because if I'm having fun, I think they'll be more likely to have fun.
I think that's a great.
Yeah, that's been my philosophy.
Yeah.
And to help accomplish that, I also enlist the power of the evil DM, my mother.
Yeah, man. She came up with some sneaky evil shit for you.
Yes, she has. Yes, she
For
has.
us as a team. That must be really fun to be able to. This is why I'm excited. Okay, I really hope that if I have children one day, that they are into D&D, and I'm not going to force them to be into D&D, but it will be fun, much as, Liam O'Brien has been able to start running campaigns for his kids. I can then do that for my kids one day, and then they'll ask me for advice, and I'll be like, oh, what, D&D like 7H? Like, what's the new races and classes and systems we got going on?
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely parent goals. And I'll also let you know that's also kind of job goals for me too. Because I work currently as a CNA, which is a certified nursing assistant.
Yeah.
And currently I work with geriatric patients. But once I become a nurse, I'd really like to try out pediatric nursing.
That'd be amazing.
And one of the things I'm thinking about with that is that, it would be kind of amazing to be a nurse working with kids, and maybe using D&D as a way to help them feel good. I don't know.
I really love that idea. I got like a little, because I've also wanted to run D&D for kids. I would love to be involved more with something like a nonprofit here in LA, 826 LA. But obviously they've got, like the Critical Role cast helping them, do things. But one day I just think I think, as you said, it's such a great thing to help kids explore and to help kids deal with for adults and kids. I'm going to say this. I'm just saying, I think it's a great way to experiment with different versions of yourself. I think it's a great way to experiment with things that you would never do as a person. I think it's a great storytelling thing you can do to explore within a world that you did not write itself. I think it's a great writing exercise for writers to be able to write about a character, again, within another person's world, but still creating your own story. I think it's a great thing for actors to be able to do, and also anybody who wants to learn to emote in a different way than they usually do. Like, I think there's so much catharsis to be had through playing D&D, and a lot of times the first characters and a lot of times the 18th characters that we play have a lot of us in them. Whether or not they're totally different than us, it can be so cathartic to yell about something that has nothing to do with you, but you are emotionally invested in. Like, there are so many benefits, I would say, in a different way, but in a similar way, that I think it's really great for young kids to write, or anybody to write fan fiction and explore within a world, again, that they didn't create, but really play within that and do storytelling within that. I think D&D is similar, that it is a amazing creative outlet to explore so many different things. And I think it gives young kids and young people a way to explore creatively in a way that other mediums don't. It's sort of like it has the interactivity of a video game, but it has the story of a good movie or a book, and it has a lot more, I am not a type of person. I love video games. I love movies. I love books. I love all these things. If my kids are into any of them, I will be happy and we will do it together. But D&D is its own mishmash of a lot of cool things, isn't it? Isn't like
It really is, yeah.
It's like really cool.
It's pretty cool. It's really cool. And I would just like to. Speaking of all that, that doesn't only go for the players too. It also goes for the dungeon masters. There's ways to put a lot of personal stake into the settings of your world or the monsters that you put into it, or any other system that you're doing. You can find ways to cathartically tell stories that you want to tell. And I'm totally not saying that I have put lots of personal stake into the Metropolis of Mayhem and have a lot of personal stories being told within.
Well, I will say that and it must be fun for you too, because obviously you're running this game. You've got so much amazing stuff going on. You do so many fun voices and characters within it. But I'm sure it's also fun watching how players interact within that and then do things that you're like, either you're like, yes, I put this in that for them and I'm really excited they found it and this is amazing, or like, what the fuck? What? Why is this happening? Why is this person trying to fuck this grandfather so hard?
Why is this building on fire?
Why is this building on fire? And I'm sure sometimes, I think you're actually quite good in that DM way of letting us go off on our kind of tangent and us being like, all right, let's bring it in a little bit. What do you guys want to do next? That's always a very, it's always like, all right, like dad voice is talking, got focus up so he doesn't turn the car around.
Yeah, but I feel like the tangents are like 20% of D&D though.
You have to let them happen a little bit.
Yeah, you gotta let them happen because they're part of the flavor of tabletop games.
Yeah.
Is enjoying the community. You gotta just you gotta smooth your way into it. You can't just cut it out.
Especially because and I know that this is sometimes different with other tables, but most of the time when we get tangential, it is with stuff that is happening with our characters because we are so excited about what's going on. So of course, as the DM, like you want to get people back on track, but you also don't want to be like, stop being enthusiastic about the things that I have put in front of you. Like there must be a level of satisfaction to that, to see people get so emotionally invested.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Question, but in terms of one shots, how do you feel about one shots, and how are there any specific one shots that you're like, I gotta tell everybody about this?
I mean, I just ran a game of Crash Pandas the other week, and that was mwah. For the people that don't know, Crash Pandas is a one-page RPG about trash pandas, also known as raccoons, that work together to drive a single car and subsequently blow up other cars and win races.
Yeah, and for some reason in this one, Ari decided we were all ghost raccoons. And
it makes sense to the lore.
And then tied it back to the main storyline at the end somehow. He somehow took a one shot about fucking raccoons driving a car and made it work in our fantasy story. So that was pretty amazing. But yeah, are there any that you've heard about or you've kind of read about that you're like, oh, I gotta run this one day?
Let's see. I don't know of anything that I would necessarily want to run, or at least nothing comes to the top of my head right now. I have played a lot of one shots because, um, as I've said, I'm usually the DM, and so when I've played, I'll hop up on Roll20 and just look up when I have time. I'll look up when people are doing one shots, and I'll just throw my hat in there to play a game. Um, and I've had a lot of really good times with one shots. They're great ways for you to think about, or they're either think about characters that you've wanted to play, or to put out characters that you want to try to test out but never had an opportunity to, or or just to get some good role play in too. You know,
Do it.
I think. Oh, I can tell the story of one of my favorite one shot characters I've made. I have a very special DM that I know named Meg, who does these really cool one shots every once in a while, and she allows you to get a little weird with it. And so we were doing a one shot, and I decided that I wanted to play a druid who was from the Arctic North. And so we started going back and forth about what I could do that could be a little wacky about this character, and I went, what if instead of having a wild shape form, he was actually a lycanthrope, a polar bear lycanthrope, so that I could, instead of doing a wild shape, I could become a bear. And I loved it. It was amazing. And I specifically remember in that game, I summoned a sleet storm underneath a bunch of Tyrannosaurus Rexes who kept tripping and falling on the ice. And then I turned into a werebear and just tore through them as they kept tripping and falling. And it was amazing. The picture in my head is just beautiful.
I think that I love one shots because the stakes are so much lower, right? If you die in a one shot, you die in a one shot. If you, and and I don't want to say they can just anything that's so wacky. You're like, this is hilarious, but it doesn't necessarily have a place in a sustained campaign. You can really go for it. I think high comedy, true horror, art can be easier to do within a one shot because it is a contained story like that. I've been wanting to run the one I've been wanting to run. You should, when I have this, you should is what's it called? It's Executive Decision, I think it's called. Executive where it is a West Wing, is it Aaron Sorkin West Wing style one shot where one player is the president and the other 4 or 5 players it's completely roleplay based. It is just they're trying to convince the president to make a decision on something. But the one I listened to recently was run by Anthony Birch, and it was that Pokemon had become real, and it was like, what are we gonna do with the Pokemon? And I was like, honestly, if I could pick something as brilliant as that and then run this game, picking my friends who are really good at talking through, like being good arguers, like I already have a couple people in mind. You are one of those people in mind. If you were like, I just think it would be a delight.
I'm not a good arguer, but I would do it for the sake of Pokemon.
No, well, I'm not saying I'm gonna have Pokemon in
it. But Pokemon.
Well,
but I literally have Pokemon right here. I literally have my.
I'm just gonna Anthony Burton just stealing your idea for Ari. So.
No, you don't have to. I'm just being silly.
Gonna ruin his life. Just kidding. I think we're getting closer to the end. I do want to ask one more question, kind of about D&D in general, and it was something I wanted to talk about earlier. We kind of got I just like seeing where the conversation goes, But in terms of, we talked a little bit about how D&D's changed through the years. and quite a lot, I think, to make things more accommodating to different types of Dungeons and Dragons players and DMs. But it's been really interesting lately seeing how much things have changed within the community about representation, about how we talk about characters and stuff. And I think it's, both as queer folks within the community, that's been really interesting to see. And I'm wondering for you if there's any, because I don't want to say, the queer agenda, but like if there are things that you enjoy exploring or have been enjoying seeing from the community, because it seems these days as though a lot of us happen to be gay or gay adjacent, doesn't it?
There's a spectrum.
There is a big spectrum, and it seems these days like the more into D&D you are, the queerer you might be. Sorry guys, just kidding, but a little bit. I'm wondering, in terms of somebody who is, queer and in the community and DMing, like what that's been like, and if there are any things that you've been able to explore more, or you've felt like you can incorporate more into campaigns. I know it's kind of a amorphous question, because it's not like you're sitting there being like, how do I make this the gayest version of itself? But you know what I mean. Maybe you are.
I think in terms of expressing it in D&D, it's less like thinking about it's more like giving me more options for characters. Like, I never want to make non-player characters that are so boring that the everyone forgets about them immediately. But just subtle little things that you can do to make characters pop out that just give them a spark.
Yeah.
I never want my non-player characters to feel like they are just there to deliver the next quest.
Yeah.
It's just very, there are just small things that you can do, whether it's having, I don't know. I would bring up an example is in the other game, which is based on Tal'Dorei, which is the continent from campaign 1 of Critical Role. The party there recently went on a quest to bring back a cache of historical treasures for a guild called the Relic Seekers.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about who the head of this guild might be. And stereotypically, you would think of, a very seasoned, wise old man, and that's like the stereotypical thing to do. And it's fine to do the stereotypes sometimes, but I was like, I'm not excited about that.
Yeah.
So instead, what I did was I thought about something that would interest me, and what interested me in that moment was a very short person who wore high heels and had a stutter.
Yeah.
And they didn't care whether people used he, she, or they, and they just wanted to get their cache of treasures. It didn't matter that everything else. They just wanted their treasures back so that they could do their history.
Yeah.
And it just made things interesting for me, and giving people representation like that feels more validating, because it shows that you're seen. You don't want to feel pigeonholed into what society tells us that we should be like. You want to feel like you can represent yourself the way that you are, the way that you always feel like you should be.
Yeah. And I think a great example of that too within the Metro of Mayhem has been Elena's plot line, as we have many characters within the campaign, the players themselves, and also their characters who are different members of, you know, different genders and different sexualities. And Elena as a queer character who has, there are things about her plot line that are queer. For instance, we were going to make sure that her ex-girlfriend wasn't dying from poison. But it's not that same tired, like, well, Elena has to go back and come out to, Elena left her family because they didn't like her because she was gay. It's like, no, it's much more complicated than that. Like, there are queer members of Elena's family. The disagreements and the estrangement there are based on completely other things. And so having characters who are just getting to live their lives and their queerness is a part of the story, but not necessarily in the same tired tropey way, not necessarily in, it's not the crux of their story. Like, the story of Elena has to do with family, and it has to do with love and romance. It doesn't have to do with coming out or being gay. Like, it's, you know, that's, yeah. I think that's been really lovely to be able to explore with that as well. And I think there's a certain comfort in playing with other queer characters and having a DM who is queer and is involved with that makes it easier to do those things without feeling self-conscious.
Yeah, I remember there's a YouTuber that I like named Lily Orchard, who kind of broadened my mind a little bit when she, in one of her episodes, was talking about queer romance and how a lot of shows on TV, like, you know, She-Ra and Legend of Korra, Avatar, they'll use a term called queer baiting, yeah. Which is you know, that
She-Ra straight up ended up being gay.
Right. But the thing about those shows is that they won't let the characters be gay until the last moment.
Yeah.
You know? And she was saying that it's more brave to start off characters already queer, already out, already married, you know, in more complex ways that can still express new and interesting stories that aren't the same tired when will they get together.
Yes.
You know, and I try to translate that into my games because it normalizes people being queer, people being themselves, and just accepting that it's a part of life, that it doesn't have to be waiting for the moment. It's just part of life.
And it's not the only stories we have to tell are not coming out or dying of AIDS. Like, there are so many other stories to tell about being queer, and that's been such a fun thing to be able to explore as part of your campaign. So yeah, we're getting close to the end. Ari, do you think a hot dog is a sandwich?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think a Pop-Tart is a ravioli by that logic?
Is a Pop-Tart a ravioli? What is the definition of because when I think of ravioli, I think of pasta. A hot dog is sandwiches because there's bread that comes together, but I would not think of a Pop-Tart as ravioli. No.
I'm gonna look up the definition of ravioli and see
yes, where this is important. This is the things that we really need to research on this show.
Yeah, this is what this show is actually about. Okay, yeah. Right now it says small pasta envelopes containing ground meat, which I don't.
That's not true either, though, because raviolis can contain cheese.
It says ground meat,
vegetables.
Vegetables. You hit both of them. I'm furious. Fine, you were correct. Man, I wish that we had more active debate around that, but that's, you know what? Whatever, that's fine. Who do you believe in ghosts?
I believe in the possibility of ghosts.
That's such a cop-out answer. If you could be, if you were haunted by one person for the next, probably for the rest of your life, if you had to be haunted by one person, who would you be haunted by?
Who would I be haunted by if I had to be haunted by one person for the rest of my life? Oh, I'd want someone fun. I'd want someone who I could have interesting conversations with. Oh, man. This is such a difficult question. Oh,
It's the hardest
It-
question so far.
it really is. I mean, not that this person is dead, but
Live person to haunt you.
can I get a live person to haunt me?
No, but I want to hear what your answer is, but it's still cheating.
Well, it's cheating, but I'd love for Matthew Mercer to haunt me for the end of my days.
I would too, but okay, if you make that, you can say Matthew Mercer will haunt you, but if you say that, then the catch in this is that he will then die today and haunt you for the rest of your life.
No, because I want to see how Kirk will end Rollins.
So it's very magnanimous of you.
Yeah. No, so I guess I won't. Oh well. I'd also just like to know what was in Frederick Douglass's head.
Yeah.
He was such an amazing man. Just the magnanimity of that guy would be really interesting to talk to, and then if you could see them, then I could just stare at his amazing hair for hours on end. So.
You're putting a big risk pick on Frederick Douglass. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Frederick
Totally.
Douglass it is. Signed and sealed. The pact is ready. The pact has been made. If you were to be sucked into any movie, which character would you then kill to get out of the movie? So you can pick the movie and the character in which you would kill to get out of the movie. That's the only way you can get out.
So that means I get to kill someone from a movie.
But also remember that anyone in that movie now thinks of you as the person who killed that, thing. And not necessarily, like, continue. I want to hear where this goes. I'm not going to give you caveats anymore.
Well, the temptation is to say Star Wars, because I would love to be in a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
But I would have to kill someone from Star Wars, and despite everyone's hatred of Jar Jar Binks, I would not choose Jar Jar Binks, because I personally love Jar Jar Binks, because that was my child. But oh man, the thing is, I'm trying to think of who I would want to kill in the movie.
Yeah, because it can't be like it can't be like I go to Star Wars and I kill a stormtrooper. You know what I mean? Like it's got to be
Exactly. It's got to be someone that you know.
Yeah.
Ooh, this is difficult. Mainly because I'm not a person that lashes out like that.
No.
I'm really not.
It's good to know that your impulse isn't to immediately kill.
Yeah.
I'm now concerned about, I don't want to say the ease, but the amount of ideas that came into my head.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know.
I'm changing the question. You are now in Star Wars The Phantom Menace. You have to kill one character. Who do you kill? Get out.
If I have to kill a character, Ooh, I would kill Aura Singh because she is in that movie for like 3 seconds. And then I'm the badass who killed Aura Singh.
I'd kill Watto because he's a slave trader.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense too.
I
But
like it.
then if you kill Watto, Anakin has no one to come back to find out where his mom went.
I know, and everything works out better.
There's a big downward spiral going on there, so
Yeah. I'm gonna say I'm happy with that decision. And then Anakin and Leia have twins, and they have to, because he goes on the run as a Jedi, and he takes Leia with him, and she's got Luke with him, and then it's Parent Trap, except better.
Sure.
Yeah. If you could have any animal as a pocket-sized version of itself, which animal would it be?
A pocket-sized version of itself.
Mm-hmm.
I would go with pandas because they're adorable.
You are not the first person who's answered pandas, and I think that is a very good answer. I think they are that would be a very adorable pet. And also, they don't really cause a lot of trouble. I think
low maintenance.
They are very low maintenance in the wild and out. Finally, let's wrap this up because this has been a delight. This has been so great to have you on, and I want to make sure you have an opportunity to. I know that you do not DM professionally, and so there's, in terms of opportunities to plug things, it's not quite as much as one usually would. But I'd love you to have the opportunity to plug any artists or creators or business owners, anybody that you get really excited about right now that you're like, you got to give this person some support because they're making cool shit.
Ooh, people that I like that make good shit. Well, of course, there is one artist known as Isabella Vergun, who I know that's pretty great. Let's see. I'm a really bad person because I will see artists and things that I like, and then I will completely and totally forget their names.
You know what, Ari? I'm going to tell you right now. If you want to look up, if you have a couple artists or anything that you think of after this, let me know. And I'm going to shout them out below in the bio so anyone can check out all of these cool artists and creators that Ari recommended.
There we
just
go.
2 or 3 if they come into your mind. And if not, that's also okay. There are a lot of cool people creating their own one-shots and campaigns. If you go on Twitter, you can find a lot of people that you can support, either financially doing that or just by downloading their one-shots or their TTRPGs and playing the shit out of them and hyping the shit out of them. So I wish I could say a specific creator, but there's so many right now. I'm going to also link to a couple of my favorite one-shots or TTRPG creators below and check them out, because if I linked them, it means I think they're really cool. And our February question, because that's when this is going to be airing in January. This is going to be airing on Thursday. My brain is not doing great, Ari. In terms of January questions, we've talked a little about this. I'm not personally one. I don't think a lot of people are into necessarily the like New Year's resolution situation, but I think 2020 has been such a shit show. I've been asking people for January, what is the thing that this year or coming up in the next couple years that you have in mind to do after kind of 2020 is such bullshit, and I think we weren't able to do a lot of the stuff that we liked. So what are things that you are looking forward to or hoping to get done or change this year?
Ooh, let's see. Definitely get back into education so that I can finish my nursing degree. I think after finishing the Metro of Mayhem, I might also want to start thinking about streaming, and figuring out how to do the setup and all that kind of thing.
So you think video games or D&D stuff?
Maybe a little bit of both. Ideally, I think I'd want to do D&D, but I would also like to be able I play video games better when I'm with people.
I agree.
So I feel like
not about you, but about video game. Yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah, so I feel like streaming video games would get me to finish them more often.
Oh, yeah. I agree. I've just started playing Jedi Fallen Order, and it'll probably take me several years to finish it.
Oh my god, that game's so good.
I love Cal. I'm like maybe 20 minutes in, half an hour in, and I'm just like, I love you, and you're my son. Yeah, when you start streaming, make sure you ask your most photogenic friends if they want to come and be in that campaign. Other people we know. But this was so wonderful having you on today, Ari. Just really fantastic. Thank you so much. You can check out Ari. Ari, I'm going to post, it is just your name, so I'm going to post your IG link down below. Any other places people can check out the cool shit that you're doing?
On the Critter Dance Party Discord.
Yes,
I'm not sure. I think we can pull up a link for that. Other than that, no, that's pretty much where I'm most active. Uh-oh.
Ruh-roh, SpaghettiOs.
It happens.
Anyway, we'll just wrap it up. Ari, thank you so much for being here. Sorry I died on you, but I'm back. I used Resurrect. It's all good. And make sure you follow Ari. Ari is so cool. And make sure to create some cool art, to support some cool art, to take, just consume some cool art, because right now we're living in tough times. Things can be rough. But if you can find those moments of joy in your day, you can take them and hold on to them. They can make the biggest difference when you need them the most. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Ari, for being on, and have a great Thursday.